It's no secret that I'm a huge fan of comic books and superheroes. In fact, the characters in my books started out as modern day superheroes and villains, but I found that they worked better as fantasy characters. My December interviewee stuck to his guns, and while, like me, his art skills weren't as strong as his storytelling skills, he was able to thread together a world where superpowers exist and what happens when one young man discovers he has the ability to fly. Please join me in welcoming Jon McBrine, author of Unsecret Identity. All right, Jon, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be on your show today.
Yeah, me. I'm excited to have you. So tell me about what your work is and what you write.
So I work in mainly YA sci-fi. I focus more on the superhero thing, and I would say what sets me apart, at least what I thought set me apart, was that I write clean. I was actually very happy to discover that there's a lot of clean fiction writers out there. There are as many of them, which is very exciting for me. And what my main book is, it actually got released on paperback today as of this recording, which I'm very happy. There's a story with that as well. It's the YA superhero adventure about a teenager who discovers he can fly, and it is a mix of coming of age, mix of action adventure. First book in a series, and I'm pretty excited about it.
How did you get into writing? Was this something that you've always wanted to do, or did you just woke up 6 years ago and you're like, you know what, I want to write a book?
And I began seriously, I say seriously, air quotes, writing in 2018, even though, like many authors, we're kind of writing throughout our entire lives, basically. But when I would say the serious start to the writing began in 2018, and it's kind of, I consider that to be a long time to get a book out, but then again, it varies. Some people spend decades. I mean, it's ridiculous. It can be a while.
What are some of your inspirations for writing?
I would say what inspired me to write it, I guess I'll just go into that, is that when you have one of these childhood ideas and they just float around in your brain for years and years and years, you got to get it out one way or the other. And the trick to that is refining it and making it a story that other humans would actually want to read and not just you. I had a friend who I'd known a long time who kind of got into writing. I wasn't aware that this person was even kind of doing that. Like, kind of knew, kind of didn't. And they were like supportive of me. They knew my interests, my creative interests and pursuits and things like that. And so they're like, hey, you should give it a go. And so I wrote this little short story just to kind of give it a go, seeing how test the waters. Like, okay, if I'm going to have like a real go at this, I got to actually have to like practice a little bit, and so thankfully I had a very supportive friend who was at the times like, hey, just give it a go, give it a whirl, and been off to the races ever since then.
What were some of the inspirations? Because obviously you were fed by other comic book superheroes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the heavy hitters, growing up, you got your Batman, the Superman, all of the classics. And when I was a kid, I was more into Marvel. So I was reading the X-Men, some Avengers, some Hulk, a lot of Spider-Man and stuff like that. And as I grew older, I just, for some reason, gravitated more towards DC. I love Superman, obviously, the flying superhero bit, I'm a fan. and but I feel Batman more often than not, maybe because writers want to write for Batman, or I don't know, maybe the editors or DC just has more money to throw at the better writers. I just feel that Batman more often than not gets the better writers most of the time.
So what's been one of the biggest challenges or the hardest parts of working on these projects for you?
So the biggest challenge is time. I know not having a lot of time for many authors, indie or not, really big time, big famous authors or indie, time is always going to be your biggest enemy, I think. So that's sort of like a more understandable, reasonable, like you could say, like, I don't have enough time to write, or when I do write, I'm not disciplined enough. I got to stop doom scrolling on Instagram. Like a lot of common problems that authors have, or I didn't meet my word count for the day. And sometimes at the end of the day, after working and you having your family that pesky family, and you know what I mean, that pesky friends and pesky social commitments at the end of the day, or doing just laundry and other household chores, whatever, all the boring stuff. At the end of the day, sometimes it's like, okay, I wrote 3 words. I have to go to sleep now because you're just so exhausted, mentally just spent, right? And I think that leads to what perhaps, at least for me, is a bigger obstacle is this weird kind of feeling of shame. And what I mean by that is I will see other authors I know or respect or admire. They're like, I wrote another 1,000 words today, or oh, book 3 is coming out, and meanwhile I'm like struggling with book 1, and I'm like, ugh. It's that compare and despair thing that,
Oh yeah.
and the imposter syndrome, which to me is one of the most annoying. I don't even know what you want to call it because it's such a weird. It's like being consciously aware that it's not true, and yet you're still stuck with the feelings of, oh man, I didn't really. Oh man, I'm going to be so. I'm the laughing stock of these other Instagram authors. They look at me like I'm not doing
Yeah.
enough. It's why I enjoy talking to other authors because there's this shared grievance I think we have. It's this thing we love, and yet when we finally have time to do it or whatever, it can sometimes be the last thing we feel like doing.
Real quickly, John, what advice can you give other would-be authors out there who are watching this interview and are wanting to get some insight from you?
Well, my fellow would-be authors, I would say just to keep on going. That sounds very simple and a little bit too simplistic, but honestly, it is the truth. It is the most universal thing I've come across is that probably have times, even if you have this drive within you, like, I just got to tell this story. I got to do something.
We're coming up on time here, John. How can people get a hold of you? How can they get connected, and how can they get copies of your work?
So the easiest thing to do is just go to jonmcbrine.com. And on I'm all over the place on socials, but the biggest one is probably Instagram. It's at Jon_McBrine_author. Gotta get those underscores in there. Just love me some underscores. And then from there, you'll get the link to the Amazon page, and you'll see the what is now the ebook version if you want to read on your Kindle app on your Kindle device, tablet, or phone, or if you want to order the first print edition for the paperback, you can read that as well. So, easiest way to do is probably just go to jonmcbrine.com. You get to see my face.
Well, John, thank you for being a part of this interview. It's been a pleasure to have you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you to John, this month's Author Awareness interviewee. Now, if you want to get copies of his work or connect with him through social media, you'll find all of those links down below.